Mr. Dozier is here from the Department of Corrections. We're going to allow them to go first this afternoon. Appreciate everyone for being here, and thank you to all your departments and agencies. We are immensely grateful for the service of your men and women, who many of whom are on the front line and out in the field doing the work that is important to protect the public's safety and well-being. And as you know, we have lost and had some injured this weekend with the shooting of Chase Maddox in Locust Grove, Georgia. Our thoughts and prayers are with the city and the family. And we also had two sheriff's deputies that were shot in the incident, and our hearts go out to them. But it just goes to show you how dangerous the job is, and how respectful we hope we are and hope we have been to the men and women that serve and wear a badge and are certified officers in the state, and to have recognized their service in recent years. And so with that, we extend our gratitude to those families and those service men and women. Commissioner Dozier, if you would, we'll go ahead and start with with your remarks for the budget for 2019.
When you guys express your hearts, and it's felt. When you look in our budget, a couple of things I'd like to bring to your attention. We passed out recently, if you do not have one, we need to get you one, but a couple of years ago, you guys asked that we start doing an annual update on our inmate services. So you should have that annual update. Last year it was a little bit more primitive and just a paper form. This year we got it a little bit fancier, and I think it tells a great story. We've already talked about that story on the 2,371 GEDs and the 6,000 certificates, but there's much more in that book. The other thing that we're passing out today, if you haven't got it after this presentation, is Beyond the Call and Beyond the Walls, and it's something that really expresses what you just mentioned. Beyond the Call is where we recognize every month an outstanding employee that's done something courageous. And Beyond the Wall is every month we recognize an offender that was in the system that didn't just buy their time and go back into society and continue to commit crimes, but took the opportunities behind the wall to change their life, and there's a story in here about that. So hopefully as you get this, you'll see some of the fruits of what you guys look at each and every year, and we're really proud of what the funds that you guys give us allows us to do. Having said that, jumping into the budget, I believe it's on page 9. Is that correct? Section 19, page 9? Thank you. I've got a PowerPoint, but I'm going to go through your chart, but I want to connect some dots with the PowerPoint. As you look through it, you see just over a $7 million, $7,282,242 add to the Department of Corrections. Just like in the supplemental, just over $2 million of that's related to statewide changes. There's actually just one increase as we go through this, and that's a little over $5 million toward the Metro State Prison. But I'll go through it and connect the dots because there's some moving pieces as we look at it. If you would, look down at section 19.3, that's the detention centers. And if we can, I guess the PowerPoint's not up, but if you got the PowerPoint up, if you'll flip to the last page, that's page 5, you'll see 19.3.4, and that's the first change that's not a statewide change. It's to transfer 138 positions and operating funds from the RSAT program. That is basically 3 RSAT programs, the Appling ITF, the West Central ITF, and the Turner RSAT program. Basically, they've been in the wrong program for the fund source. So you'll see a reflective cut in state prisons program for that $8.9 million. The one right below it, 19.3.5, which is the elimination of one-time funds for GED instructional materials and software, is $224,000. You'll see an additional cut in the state prisons program of $568,323. We'll get to it in a minute. But both of those items total $792,323, and that's one-time cost related to the upstart of the GED programs that's no longer needed because we have the software that was needed. The next change is on the next page. If you flip to, I guess, page 10, you'll see at the very top 19.5.5, and it's to redirect funds from the electronic healthcare record to the state prisons program for Metro Reentry Prison annualization. That $1.2 million basically is being deducted from last year's funding of $8.7 million for the electronic health records. It was a 3-year phase-in, if you recall that testimony. The first year was a little over $17 million. Last year was $8.7 million, and this year is $7.4 million. So by taking the $1.2 million out, that leaves us the $7.4 million for the final and remaining year of phasing in the electronic health records, and it applies it to the Metro State Prison. So you'll see a $1.2 million add in state prisons. In that same section in 19.5.7, you'll see to utilize existing funds to implement phase 3 of the electronic health records. And I should have just lumped that one into the top one, but that's just authorization to continue to use that $7.4 million that's remaining. The final changes are in the state prisons program. As you look at state prisons, the first change is 19.8.5. And you'll see that that is the reduction of that RSAT money that we moved to detention centers, the $8.9 million. 19.8.6 is the annualized operating expenses for the Metro State Prison, $5,008,101. When you add that to the line just below it where we're transferring the $1.2 million, you get the annualized cost of the $6.3 million. That gives a full 12-month funding for the Metro Prison. Last year, you guys funded in the base $6.3 million. So this is the additional 6 months. So the total budget for Metro is $12 million, 12.6. And the final item I've already somewhat spoke to, and that's the elimination of the GED funding, the $568. Mr. Chairman, those are the changes to the budget this year. I'd be happy to answer any questions on these or anything else that may be on your minds.
Thank you. We'll have questions from members of the committee. Going back to the detention centers, section 19.3.4, this was a recommendation that came out of the Zero Balance Budgeting Committee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So this is a reorganizational effort that commission or committee had recommended back to the Department of Corrections.
Yes, sir. There's approximately, there's 12 RSAT programs. Scott, 3 of them are state prisons. Is that accurate?
There's 4 programs in 3 locations.
4 are in state prisons, the remainder in detention centers. These 3 had been in state prisons and should have been in detention centers. So it's just aligning where the expenses should be by program.
Right. And then on the Metro Reentry, with respect to the health records, the department has been making a concerted effort to place all the health records into a digital form so that you'll have them, and then those records can easily travel with the inmate if they're moved from a private prison to the Department of Corrections or vice versa, or to another prison within the system. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's accurate.
And that's to avoid the problem that you had when we had the hurricanes come through Georgia, and we had to relocate the files and manually pick up all of these files and move them around.
Absolutely, and just day-to-day transfers as well. But that's a great example. Yes, sir.
And on the health issues, there was a recent article in the AJC concerning the Augusta State Medical Prison, and in that article there were some unflattering pictures that I saw there, but I always try to look beyond the surface of something and go a little further in the questioning. And my question to you is, as far as the reoccurrence of or recidivism, the reoccurrence of medical conditions that may be post-operative,
right?
After you perform surgery at the Augusta State Medical Prison, do you have any post-op reoccurrence for that are related to infections that are post-op conditions from that facility?
We have not, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that question.
And in terms of kind of the issue of sepsis that may run through hospitals, we know that is a problem for facilities that are private facilities, that are nonprofit hospitals, that are in the public sector, that are not associated with the prison system. We know generally that there are post-op complications that for readmittance into those facilities after operations, which is pretty commonplace. It's staggering to me that you don't have any, which tells me a lot about the surgical center, the competency of the people that are working there. Sepsis is also a problem that runs through private hospitals and those in the marketplace. Do you have any sepsis conditions?
No, sir. We have had some across the system, but none related to the Augusta Medical Prison or that hospital or procedures related to the hospital.
So despite this newspaper article, you're actually running a very clean and healthy facility that generates no post-op readmittance and that does not have any problems with sepsis. Is that correct?
That is very true, and we're doing things to even make it better. So just to expound on that for a second, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
You're right. We had quite a few articles on the Augusta State Medical Prison, something we take very serious, something I've been down there several times myself, as well as the staff. Randy Sauls, which the committee here has met, he is our Assistant Commissioner over Health Services. He came from running the hospital down in Valdosta for many years. He spends every Wednesday down there making sure that, although we've not had any issues, as you mentioned, want to be real clear on that we continue to move that hospital forward. You're right, there were some unflattering pictures, some things that we're not proud of that were in there. We don't want to wash over that. But I want to tell you that the unflattering pictures have taken care of. The trash that was in the hallway is not there anymore. It was actually there to be searched, so there was a reason there. I don't think that was the best procedure. That's why we changed it. We've also gone in and painted, cleaned, hired a terminal cleaning company that comes in to make sure that if there was any type of bacterial or anything there, that there is none. So that starts on the 16th of this month and will take approximately 6 weeks to clean the entire hospital so that we can get rid of those allegations, even though we've not seen any sepsis or anything else related to those issues. So we're just trying to be over precautious. And also, as in anything, when you dive into something, you do find things you need to clean up and perfect, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you for that. Our chairman from Liberty County, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Thank you for your testimony. I do have some concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And as a member of this appropriations subcommittee, it's very obvious that there were some problems. Because if there weren't any problems, you wouldn't have had to clean up anything.
Yes, sir.
There definitely were some problems there, and I appreciate you admitting it, because the citizens deserve to know. And I know that the correction system runs a good ship, but all ships can stand a little touch-up every once in a while.
Absolutely.
And because I'm a great believer in the free press, and a whole lot more people will read the press than will hear your testimony today.
Yes, sir.
I like to be able to hear from you and tell folks. So, while I'm glad that you're doing some things, I don't want people to think that we're just here to rubber stamp.
Yes, sir.
We allow citizens an explanation for everything. And while I respect and appreciate the department, I do think that it might surprise you that the legislature is not perfect. I know that's surprising. Especially certain. All of us can use
Yes, sir.
some tightening up. And some of those allegations were of the nature that it was recommended by Representative Green in one of our meetings. We didn't move forward on it, about us going down there, because I want to get some direct answers, because the allegations were serious enough until they deserve to be looked into.
Mm-hmm.
And see what you've done. Obviously, you've done some things that are very good, but you wouldn't have had to do it if there wasn't nothing
I think it's a great question. I think you're exactly right. I think when we talk about our home, we talk about our business, we talk about our personal lives, we allow things to creep in. And I think when you look at the relationship of a hospital and a prison combined together, and you look at daily operations of a lot of surgeries, which is not an excuse, it's just a statement, that there got to be a point where some cleaning need to be done. And that's something that I hope you heard me say. We needed to clean. And so we've done a host of things to one, we want to make sure that we take away the problem. I believe anytime there's an issue, you take away the problem. And so we have been cleaning, we've been painting, we've been doing the cosmetic things that you would normally do anywhere, at your home, somewhere else. On top of that, we've looked at the entire system. Our partners with GCHC, which is a subsidiary of Augusta State University, have been great partners through this. And we've basically gone through with Randy and with them and done a fine step on what all needs to be replaced. Do we replace a sink? Simple things like that. And so we have just to give you an idea, we have a team of 12 down there that's basically just making sure any water leak, any type of engineering type facilities fix that goes on in all our prisons is being handled immediately down at that facility. On top of that, we've done some leadership changes. We have a new warden in place. We also have a new hospital administrator in place from the GCHC side, which I think is great because I think you asked how do we get there. I think it's through communication. I think at some point there was a failure of communication between the warden, the medical doctor, and others. Now, as I keep explaining, I want to go back to the chairman's point. We've been running a good hospital with a lot of surgeries without any complications. However, we got to do better, as you pointed out. As you look in there, I mentioned the terminal cleaning. We've got that terminal cleaning coming in that will do a head-to-toe clean, and that gets rid of any issue. Somebody wants to think there's some type of bacteria in there. You honestly don't know till you test. So we're going to bring in a cleaning company that gets rid of anything and everything that's in there. We're hiring an environmental service manager down there that's daily responsibility will be to run it like a hospital and make sure the cleanliness is stayed where it is. So that'll be a brand new position on our side in the agency. That's every day is their job not to walk past a sink that needs to be fixed or something else that can cause that issue. We just recently changed the oxygen tanks down there. That's a little thing, but when you look at it and you're trying to fix it every day to have surgeries, we had to do it. The next thing we're going to be doing is when we looked, we're having to manually, because that was not a hospital initially. We used to do the surgeries over at Augusta Medical Hospital. And I believe in the 2005 time frame, those surgeries moved over to the prison. The humidity level in there is done very manual in there. We have a system where every day they check the humidity. If the humidity is not exactly right, you can't do surgeries. Well, we're gonna over the summer, we're gonna have to shut down the hospital for a few weeks, several weeks, in order to put a new system in that's not a manual system. So we're doing those upgrades that you mentioned. How do we make sure it doesn't come back up again? I believe we've got a system of accountability from people to systems that cover that process to ensure that hopefully we're not sitting here having that same conversation again, and I don't believe we will.
I don't either. Floyd Rogers.
Commissioner, I'm going to follow up on that. I'm going to end up on a positive note for you, though. I mean, like my friend Al, I appreciate the transparency. I appreciate the fact that you guys have taken a proactive approach to this. You see that there are things that need to be done. Sitting there listening to it, looking into it, or whatever, it seems like the majority of things that we saw were of an aesthetic nature, but you guys see opportunities to do things. But I'm going to end up on a positive note by just asking you your opinion. Based on everything I've heard, there are many hospitals would be envious of the type of incident report that y'all had. Is that not correct?
I would hope so. I can't answer for others, but thank you for the comment.
Thank you.
Thank. I think that's. I think it's important to note that the actual record, the medical records, and the treatment and the post-op, those are real numbers. Those are real measurements that any hospital has to live up to.
That's right.
And the fact that you don't have any of those complaints, you don't have any of that reoccurrence, it isn't fluff. It's actually real numbers, and it's really important to the inmates to have good medical care while they're there. And that only ensures that when they leave, they'll be in a position of good health so that they can be productive members of society post their sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, Mr. Commissioner, we're going to have to move on to our next guest. We've asked for representatives from the 2 private prisons that or companies that operate private prisons in the state. And I'm not sure why the mics are going out, but they are. And so we'll have a presentation, if you will, from the GEO group that has Riverbend Prison, I think in Milledgeville. We'll ask them to come up and present if they can. Mr. Ford is here. Mr. Head is here. Fred Head, good to see you, sir. And he is the warden, and we'll have him come up and present. Is anybody else going to join Warden Head? Okay. All right. And we have about 10 minutes for each of the private prisons, so we'll stay within that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and other members of this subcommittee of public safety. What an honor it is to come before you all and talk about the correctional officers that are at Riverbend. First, let me personally say the incident that happened in Locust Grove is personal to me. My son-in-law serves on the city council. As you well know, Mr. Chairman, you know him well. And I pray for healing for the entire community. We did provide some handouts for you, some packets, as you would look at them at your leisure, which would include portions of the contract, the Riverbend estimated 2% merit increases from 2012 to 2017, the per diem rate that was given to Riverbend from 2010 to the present. Also, employee demographics is in the packet, and the current wages versus the new GDC wages. And the last item in the packet would be the Riverbend Correctional Officer turnover data. Again, my name is Frederick Head. I'm the warden at Riverbend Correctional Facility, the GEO Group. Prior to opening Riverbend in 2011, I had a 34-year career with the state of Georgia. 10 years with the Department of Labor, 24 years with the Georgia Department of Corrections. My positions include wardens of 6 institutions, to include the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia, which is my hometown. I also served as Assistant Commissioner of GDC on an interim basis. The Riverbend facility located in Milledgeville, Georgia, the GEO Group built, owns, and has operated this facility since December 2011. Riverbend is a 1,500-bed facility for medium and minimum male security inmates and has the expansion footprint for up to 2,500 beds. At Riverbend, we continue to enhance Governor Deal's criminal justice reform efforts, recognizing our responsibility to improve the lives of those individuals entrusted to our care. Riverbend has served as a GEO Continuum of Care pilot program site since 2015, and we have already invested more than $1.5 million at our own expense above the terms of the contract to implement this industry-leading recidivism reduction initiative. I'm proud to say that our leadership in developing programs that are proving to reduce recidivism, the GEO Continuum of Care, was recognized with the 2018 American Correctional Association Innovations in Corrections Award. This unparalleled integration of evidence-based programming, intensive case management, and post-release services, including a 24/7 call center, are making a real impact on the lives of those individuals returning to our Georgia communities and have initially resulted in a 38% reduction in recidivism. We currently employ 315 full-time employees, of which 202 are correctional officers. The starting wage for correctional officers at Riverbend is $12 per hour. Although each year since our opening, Riverbend has requested a per diem increase as allowed by our contract, we have never received an increase. As such, GEO has self-funded annual wage enhancements to our correctional officers at our own expense, now totaling approximately $1.2 million. As a result of the well-deserved pay raises provided to state-employed correctional officers, the disparity in wages at our facility in comparison to nearby state-operated facilities is now more than $3 an hour, making our recruitment and retention of correctional officers extremely challenging as our efforts undergo as our officers undergo the same training and maintain the same qualifications as their state counterparts. This disparity has real-life impacts as the turnover rate of our correctional officers for calendar year 2017 was 79%. If funds are appropriated by the legislature, I want to assure you that every dollar will be utilized as a 100% pass-through directly to my security employees in the form of a well-deserved needed pay enhancement. It has truly been an honor for me to work in the Georgia correction system for most of my adult working life and at the River Bend facility for the last 6.5 years. I'm so proud of our staff and the outstanding work they perform each day to keep our community safe. However, it is extremely frustrating when a correctional officer with a promising career tells me they enjoy working at River Bend, they enjoy the staff, but they have to leave because they need to make more money at a state-run facility. I can't argue with that. A loaf of bread at Kroger costs the same thing for a state correctional officer as it does for a River Bend correctional officer. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon, and I am prepared to take any questions that you may have.
Chairman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Warden Head, it's good to see you again. It was great visiting down at River Bend there. Tell me, looking at your contract there, what kind of programs do you have that are you're providing the prisoners with that are not included in your contract?
We are, by contract, providing the core courses for inmates for reentry. The one that is not included in the contract is called our transitional program under continuum of care. The transitional program houses inmates that are 24 months to release. Since we opened, we went from 304 staff members to 315. The 11 that we added were program staff. These are case managers whose caseload was previously 1 to 200, now it's 1 to 50. So those inmates are housed in the same area. They have more face-to-face with their case managers. The policy says that you normally can have a quality contact with a case manager every 90 days. Well, we provide them to see them more than once every 90 days, 2 or 3 times. So when they are released, they receive vouchers for food, they receive vouchers for clothing. If they come to the metro Atlanta area, they receive a voucher for rapid transit for MARTA to get from point A to point B. We also provide housing, pay rent for them. If you go to a rural area like where I'm from, Florvilla, Georgia, they get a bicycle with a chain so nobody will steal it from them. With a lock on it, okay? So the problem with a release when you may not only get but $25 suit of clothes and a bus ticket will be that you're going to the same environment that you came out of. And that's what we're trying to do to change that environment.
Mr. Chairman, just one more.
Yes, and I see we have a good many questions, so
Okay.
just keep in mind we're on a tight schedule.
At River Bend, and then we have a state facility down the road.
We have a state facility next door.
Okay.
Right
What
next door.
is the difference between the pay at River Bend and that? I think in your remarks you said a $3 difference.
Yes, Baldwin State Prison, which is a mental health facility, different from River Bend, but right next door pays about $15 an hour where we pay $12.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Caldwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Head, my question is, you said that if you got this increase in pay, that 100% of that would pass through to your security employees. Who is a security employee?
The security employees will be the correctional officers, the sergeants, and the lieutenants.
Would that be any administrative people?
No, sir, it will not be.
Would it be any people who are trained to be security officers but are working in some other capacity at the present time, but have that training to be a security officer but are not doing it now?
No, sir.
We can be assured of that.
You can be assured of that, yes, sir.
Well, I asked that question 2 years ago and I didn't get that response, and that's the reason I'm asking it again.
That is correct. He did ask that question.
Well, you didn't ask me. You didn't ask me.
I asked whoever did the presentation,
It was.
and that's the reason I'm asking you.
Sir, to my knowledge, the only people that will get it will be those officers who run a post, who work the shifts, the boots on the ground.
All
Not
right.
anybody that has been a correctional officer before and may have become a counselor or doing another job. It will be those post-certified officers who work with our inmates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our chairman from Liberty County, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that question was asked. I'm glad you answered it, because I think it's very important that we know that these raises will be going to correctional officers. I think that, and having visited your facility, and I found it to be a nice facility from the visitation I had, I feel the same way about correction officers as I feel about all law enforcement officers. You've got to pay people at least a livable wage to be able to keep them working, and I definitely feel that way about deputy sheriffs, who you're gonna have to call if you have a jailbreak.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Just a couple of follow-up questions, Warden. A couple of things is, first, I would like to make sure that Riverbend is looking into technical training for the inmates so that they have skills when they leave. And I know that y'all are working on that program as well, so I want to encourage that. And then secondarily, these are more statements than questions. Looking at the contracts between GEO and Core Civic, I've noticed a difference, and I'd like you to try to work on reconciling this difference. In terms of medical treatment, both physical and psychological medical treatment, there's a distinction between those two contracts. I'd like to see them get in a uniform state, whereby the public is assured at least a minimum amount of medical treatment at a certain dollar figure. So that's something to look into. And then and with that, we'll follow up later on those issues and get into the details of them.
Yes, sir.
But I appreciate you being here, Warden Ed. Thank you so much for being here and coming in from Flovilla. My grandmother's home area. I have a lot of family members that are buried there, and some old farmland that we still work. So thank you for being here. Flovilla. It's just north of Cork, Georgia, and Cork, Georgia, and the Nancy Hanks used to run right through there.
Oh boy, that must be some good land, Nancy.
Well, Flovilla, Mr. Williams, means Villa of Flowers. Flovilla.
Mighty good. Midway just means midway.
All right, with that,
Chairman, I think there's a reason his mic is not working.
Very good, very good. With that, we'll have our presenters from Core Civic, is the other private prison provider that we have in the state of Georgia. They have three prisons that they provide for the state of Georgia. We have contracts with them. Jerry Langsford and Heather Biden are here today to present on behalf of them. There's a PowerPoint presentation they have here, and there may be, hopefully we'll get a little video here, and but there may be a glitch in that. If that doesn't work out, we'll resolve it later on. Thank you. Go ahead and take us on the way, Mr. Jerry. I appreciate you being here today.
Yes, sir. And I'm going to leave this like this because otherwise I'll probably mess it up. So, again, my name is Jerry Langford with Core Civic. With me today is Heather Bidding. She's our principal at Wheeler Correctional Facility, was at Coffee Correctional Facility a few weeks ago, and I am going to try to limit the amount of time I talk because I really want to give her the opportunity to talk about the diesel mechanic and welding programs we have at those facilities. That's a program that you all funded a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, the video that we have embedded, the technology doesn't match up here, and so what I will do after this hearing is we'll follow up with a paper copy of the presentation as well as a video, and be sure to get that to you all, Mr. Chairman. So again, my name is Jerry Langford. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And longstanding partnership here in Georgia since 1998, 3 facilities, 1 in Coffee, 1 in Jenkins, 1 in Wheeler. I will say, and I think I've said this to this committee before, how appreciative we are for the partnership here in Georgia. I honestly have walked across the country, and I would tell you that we've got as strong a partnership here in Georgia. You've got as strong a team at the Georgia Department of Corrections as any department anywhere I've worked. And so want you to know how appreciative we are for that, and do not take that for granted a single day. So thank you very much. Diesel mechanic and welding programs, as you all know, in January of 2015, I believe Governor Deal rolled out his interest and put in his budget $2 million to fund these programs. The Department of Corrections then issued an RFP, which we bid on, and subsequently decided they liked our bid, and so we invested $6 million amongst both facilities in Georgia, built those programs, and the programs are currently working. And as of December, I was at a graduation at Coffee Correctional Facility with the commissioner and his team to witness a graduation that honestly was beyond what I expected it to be. And that's a video I'll share with you all. But with that, really wanted to turn it over to Ms. Bidding, let her talk about the programs down there, answer any questions you all have about those, and then I'll finish up.
Good morning, y'all. Heather Bidding, principal now at Wheeler, come from Coffee. And just a little bit about the program's overview. We are in partnership with Wiregrass Georgia Technical College and Oconee Fall Line Technical College for both facilities for these programs. The diesel mechanics program, just a little background of it, it takes about a year to complete the program, 3 semesters, and about 2 semesters and 7 months for the welding program. The diesel program covers diesel drivetrains, diesel brake systems, and shop safety. The welding program covers gas metal arc welding and oxy-fuel cutting. Those are some of the certifications that they're earning in those programs. We just, like Mr. Langford said, completed in December of this past year the first program graduates. August, the welding students graduated. December, the diesel mechanics completed. And starting out with about 32 per program, we're completing roughly around 25 per program. So that's about a 75% completion rate, and that's mainly due to, it would be 100%. Let me back up on that. The 75% completion rate is mainly due to transfers within the system. So someone in the program transfers to another facility, or releases through the program. We had a couple of inmates that were released prior to graduation from both facilities. So that's where that percentage is coming from. In the actual completion rate per facility, I think there was about a 99% pass rate of having about an A average, A to B average. So there's a lot of participation in these programs and a lot of good effort and drive from the inmates to participate in these programs. They're really honored to be a part of it. And with our partnership with the technical schools, we've had long-standing partnerships with both of these technical schools on the academic side, offering the GED programs. And so when we rolled into these programs for the vocational, it was just adding to our partnership. It grew our relationship with these technical schools. And honestly, we couldn't ask for anything better from the partnership with the technical schools. We're even looking at, the technical schools are looking at other opportunities to expand and provide additional programs as well in the vocational field. And like I said, the certification earned by the students with the technical schools, they have a degree program, a diploma program, and a technical certificate of credit program. The programs we're offering with these facilities are the technical certificate of credit, and that's just a small portion of the diploma program. As you all know, both facilities and both programs, once they complete these certifications, they can, upon release, roll them right into, and they will transfer into the diploma programs for the colleges if they choose to do that. If not, their certificates of credit are just as good and withstanding for the job force as any other. Our graduation statistics I talked about just a minute ago, like I said, we're about 75% of a completion rate, and the rest is due to transfers or releases, but of that, about 99% are A averages, so good participation from the students. Did a little background on the salaries just for the state of Georgia. The welding starting salaries can range anywhere from the mid-20s into the mid-30s, and that's depending on location and depending on experience. So that's a good starting salary for a welding student to leave and back into reentry into the society and be able to get a job with that degree. And that job can go up into the $50,000 and $60,000 range, again, depending on location and experience. For the diesel mechanics, it starts a little higher, usually around the mid-40s, again, depending on location and experience. But then they can also go up into the 50s and 60s range for salary. And then just a little background, like Mr. Langford said, he attended a graduation as well as our administration team here back in December. We had a pretty touching ceremony, our first graduation for both of these programs. And in my years of doing this through GED and through other vocational programs, we've had several inmates that are released prior to the actual ceremonies, and that's not uncommon. They obtain their certification and they're released. But in these ceremonies, I've never had, until this past December, until this past graduation, never had an inmate who was released prior to the ceremony and actually wanted to come back to the place. You know, when they're out, they're trying to get as far away as possible. They don't want to come back. They can have that certificate mailed to them. But I've actually had several that, if I get out, Miss Bidding, can I come back? Can you talk to the warden? Can I come back? They're proud of this. These are programs that they are truly proud of, and they know that even above and beyond a GED is important, but this is something that's going to get them a job and in a specific area. And as much as needed as these programs are in our communities and in our state, they're really proud of this. So we actually had, like Mr. Langford said, I wish the video would work for you, but in the video we actually had a student that had returned to Coffee Facility and became a guest speaker for the program. He had been released a couple of weeks prior and came back, and it was really a touching experience. So we're really truly thankful for these programs and the partnership with GDC and with the technical colleges.
Ms. Bidding, thank you so much for that.
Yes,
We
sir.
have a question from Representative Williams.
Thank you. You caught my interest. That's those are two good job areas. And I don't know if you train for part-time employment, but I make $17.4 up here.
We'll hire you. Come on.
Last 16 years without a raise. I'd love to be considered for your program.
You come on.
Judge, do you have a question? I thought you might have the same question for Core Civic as you had for GEO. Well, why don't you tell us, Jerry, what you're asking for exactly, so that we know, and then Chairman Caldwell can make sure he drills down on that subject.
Yes, sir. Again, appreciate it, and I'll try to be brief. I wanted you all to hear from Ms. Bidding. We take this very seriously, and I think, as you all are, very proud of the results we've seen. As you can see on this slide, which we'll share, GEDs are the same, other industry recognized vocational certificates. I mean, we're putting the work in at our facilities, and you can see on this slide just CPI growth, and this comes from Bureau of Labor Statistics over the past 15 years or so compared to our per diem increases. I will admit or say that, you know, we have had population increases at the facility, and we're very appreciative for that. But purely on a per diem basis, we've seen pretty much flat per diem over the past 15 years at Coffee and Wheeler. And as to the ask, we are asking, and Mr. Chairman, I think this is consistent with the conversation we had with you, we're asking for a 2.5% increase at our facilities. That equates to just over $2.6 million between Coffee, Wheeler, and Jenkins. And Judge, to your question, you know, that is true. Like the GEO group, we will be giving these pay raises to those employees at those facilities. One of the slides I skipped past, but you all will have in the packet that we hand out, you'll see we've given pay increases and other merit increases over the years at those facilities. We recognize that you have to pay for good work. We think we've got some of the best employees in the state of Georgia, and we're going to continue to do that, but certainly any help you all can provide will be much appreciated.
Judge Caldwell.
Well, I will ask the question, in the event you were to get the percentage raise that you asked for, is that across the board, or is it just to, as this other gentleman said, security employees?
That pay increase will be for correctional officers at Jenkins, Coffee, and Wheeler. And so those will go to the line staff who are there, as the gentleman before us talked about, boots on the ground, working day to day with the inmates.
Well, to be quite honest with you, and as I remember from when I asked this question before, and you said, well, we didn't get it, and that's the reason we didn't award it, was because my question was not answered direct. It was, well, we're going to give them to the people that need it, and that included, of course, administrative personnel and other types of individuals. And I'm being honest with you, that's the reason it was not given. And if that's the way it's going to be this time, you won't get my vote again.
I appreciate the candor, and that answer stands. We'll be giving this to the correctional officers,
All right.
you know, who
I'll
are
take
standing
it your word.
those posts. Yes, sir.
I wasn't really clear on that.
Mr. Chairman, you know I don't have a problem with making myself clear.
I think we do not have a failure to communicate on that issue.
Coming from a great President Boothby.
That's exactly right. A little cool hand Luke for you. We appreciate the presentation and the information too. In that request, and that will cover, and just so the committee knows, that both Geo Group and Core Civic do have contractual provisions with the state. It is not a mandatory increase, but it is a permissive request that they are entitled to ask. They're entitled to ask this committee and the General Assembly for those, and the governor's office as well. But it is to us to ask this question, as we are the appropriating branch of government. So they're making this request, and this is not the first year they've made the request. They've gone through this, as the judges pointed out, last year. So we appreciate the request, and we appreciate the information. And it is true that since this has started, they've not gotten the adjustment to the CPI that the contract contemplates. But things have been tight across the entire state, and so we've been in a constant kind of catch-up mode, if you will. You're not able to show the video, is that correct?
No, sir, and it's unfortunate, but what I will commit to do is I want to come and visit each of you individually. I do think that you should have the opportunity to visit the video or view the video. Mr. Chairman, I think you've seen it. I think it's very moving to see the impact that specifically the diesel mechanic and welding program are having on these guys, and it's our hope that they get out and get a good job and get a fresh start.
And remember, committee members, that Core Civics, when the governor asked for an implementation of a technical nature in terms of the education that the inmates would receive as a way to help transition out of the prison system, Core Civics stepped up and put in a $5-some-odd million installation for the welding and the diesel mechanic facilities. We have in the past put in a budget item of $2 million approximately a few budget cycles ago to offset that. But I just wanted to make sure the committee was aware that that they've been meaningful partners with the state on our criminal justice reform. Floor leader.
Yeah, just one quick thing. I know you're going to try to get around to see everybody. One of the things I think might be interesting, you sent it to me, you emailed me the video at my request. Could we make arrangements, Mr. Chairman, to get him some emails, the House emails or whatever, because I think it would be important for everybody to see it. It's a pretty moving video and very informative.
We'll make some arrangements along those lines, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langford.
Thank you, Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Benning. We appreciate you both being here today. We're going to move on to the Department of Community Supervision. Normally Mike Nail is here, but I think we have Scott Maurer and Matt Ogles will be here today to present on behalf. I think the commissioner is out of town. Is that correct?
No, sir. He's actually at another hearing.
Oh, he's okay. Doing double duty. So y'all are splitting efforts. Well, thank you for being here, and I'm going to let you jump right into it.
All right, thank you. And I believe what I'll share with you today is a very brief presentation. There are very few changes in our budget this year, so I will start with of course, this is Matt Ogles. He's our budget director. My name's Scott Maurer. I'm the assistant commissioner for the Department of Community Supervision. And we've shared with you a presentation, just a few short slides of a couple key things that we wanted to point out. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, there's just a few things I'd like to highlight prior to going into the few changes that we do have in our budget request for FY19. If you look at page 2, the top of page 2, Senate Bill 174 impact. As I know, the committee members know that last year, at the beginning of the Criminal Justice Reform Council, one of the focuses was going to be on probation supervision. And I know this will be repeated information to many of you, but Georgia has 4 times the national average of probation rates nationally. We also have the longest probation sentences, as well as some of the highest caseloads in the country. And so the Criminal Justice Reform Council last year focused on ways to impact those caseloads and the length of sentence. And so we're very happy to report that since July of this year, and of course this has been a very short time period, we have seen a reduction of 7,894 early terminations granted by judges statewide. We've also increased the number of offenders that are currently under unsupervised or on unsupervised status to 47,000. And so that reduction is about a 23.2% reduction in active cases since the implementation of Senate Bill 174 in July. And that has a significant impact on our ability to focus our supervision efforts on the highest risk offenders by lowering some of our officers' caseloads and focusing on those with the highest criminogenic needs. And so we certainly appreciate the support of these committee members in last year's Criminal Justice Reform Council, and just wanted to share a little bit of information with you about how successful it's been to date. If you go to the next slide, I'll be talking from, I believe it's section 18, pages 7 and 8 on the tracking sheet. And really there's only, in FY19, there's only 2 changes. If you look at 18.4.4, it transfers $284,198 to misdemeanor probation. That is actually moving from 18.2, which is field services. That transfer request is a result of OPB's zero-based budgeting recommendations this year. That is 2 positions. It is actually the director of the misdemeanor probation oversight division, and as well as the director of training. Those 2 people were actually being paid out of the field budget, and we're moving them over to misdemeanor probation oversight. The other change you'll see there is on 18.2.6, and that is in the field services budget, and that is to eliminate $56,435 in one-time funds that were related to the Gwinnett Day Reporting Center. Those were essentially startup costs from last year, and we feel that we can operate with that reduction. The next page of your presentation is actually the FY19 bond requests. You'll see that there's a $510,000 request for a new office in our Waycross Community Supervision Office. That office has been in existence a long time and is actually an old motel as opposed to hotel. It is 1 story, and if the picture kind of does it a little bit of justice, but the way that office is set up is an office, cars pull up to the front door of an office, and so there's very little security. There is no security between somebody getting out of that car and walking in the front door of somebody's office like you would a hotel room. So we've asked to tear that building down and build a new building. There's already a day reporting center on that same location. That building will stay in place and build a new building. And then $265,000 for major maintenance and repairs. Those are for our 10 state-owned facilities.
When you were going to replace the offices, I'm assuming we're going to a new building, right? A whole
Yes,
other
sir, that's correct.
We're not going to renovate this.
That's correct. And
motel
actually,
and yeah.
the cost of renovating the motel and upkeep was actually very close to what it's costing us to build a new building anyway.
But you're going to a new building.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And then the last page is really just our annual report is now on our public website, and you can find the link there. And the last thing barring any questions that I want to ask is anybody that has not been on a ride-along with one of our officers, or if you have been and would like to do it again, please reach out to us. I think that it is extremely beneficial to all of our stakeholders. If they go one time on a ride-along, they'll understand that the job that the community supervision officers do on a daily basis out in the field is a challenging task, but we have tremendous employees that do a great job every day. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you doing that. As questions may percolate from the committee, I have a few we'll start off with.
Yes, sir.
There is some concern that I've heard from members of the committee and then elsewhere that that there's a disconnect, and maybe it's just a disconnect in communications between the state courts and in the management and oversight of probationers coming out of state court. And in Cherokee County, there's some concerns about the duration and monitoring of probationers there. So if you would please get with Representative Ballinger, Chairman Ballinger, and talk to her a little bit about that. There's some concerns there with the operations of community supervision.
I'm sorry, community supervision, or is it misdemeanor supervision?
I think it's community supervision, but
okay.
I'll let you follow up with her and check.
Yes, sir.
And then also, now that you have had the benefits of seeing such a reduction in workload and case numbers as a result of Senate Bill 174, I believe it was. Can you tell us about the impact and what adjustments, if any, you're making to staffing, oversight, and vehicles if you have had such a reduction in the cases?
Well, yes, sir. And I appreciate the question. The reduction in cases is actually getting us just a little bit closer to what is the national average of caseload sizes. We're still well above those averages, even with the reduction in number of cases under supervision. And so we have been able to fill all vacant positions. So currently we're only filling those, the turnover for people that retire or quit. And as far as vehicles go, last year we asked for vehicles so that we could have an average of 2 vehicles per officer. We've met that average, and so we have no vehicle requests this year. To answer your question, I don't know that we're not going to be able to reduce the number of officers we have performing supervision in the community through the reductions in numbers of people under supervision, but we can certainly get our caseloads closer to the national average, as well as begin to continue to focus our resources on those that provide or that have the highest risk of reoffense.
Did you say 2 vehicles per officer?
1 vehicle
Because
per 2
I don't
officers,
think we
yes.
authorized that. That's yeah. I was in there. Okay.
1 vehicle per 2 officers,
There
which
we go.
initially
All right.
our plan was a vehicle per officer, and we realized that it would be more beneficial and efficient to have 2 officers assigned to 1 vehicle.
Okay. You sure that was just a slip of the tongue, or
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
We don't have parking lots full of cars that aren't being used, I
All
assure
right.
you.
Okay. Very good. Questions from members of the committee? Okay. Seeing none, we thank you very much for you being here.
Thank you, sir.
Matt, thank you for coming as well. Good to see you both. Give our regards to the commissioner.
Will do.
And tell him that we would like to see him over here sometime too. All right. We have next on the agenda is GEMA, or Georgia Emergency Management Authority and Homeland Security. Director Homer Bryson will be with us, and we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. We are on the tracking sheet. We're on page 13, 27.5, and I will be brief. 27.5, 1, 2, and 3, those are the statewide changes that you have already seen and heard about from the other agencies that have presented. There's 2 changes specific to our agency. 27.5.4, that is to increase funds for local government 911 authority, a single position that was established by an executive order by the governor. Total cost of that is $138,476. 27.5.5 is to eliminate funds related to equipment purchases, and that's a savings of $56,820. So our net program change for FY19 is an increase of $76,837. And that concludes our report, and we're glad to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Executive Director, the 138, which is line 27.5.4,
Yes.
that I know that we have the governor's executive order, but that frankly does need to be implemented into law in order for us to actually create the position and create the authority. Is that correct?
What we're doing is we were able to cover the funds for that position within the existing 17 budget or 18 budget. We do not have the funds to carry that forward for another fiscal year, and we're just trying to cover the gap between when funds are, if we're successful with the legislation and funding comes forward, there'll be a gap before we recruit that 1% as proposed cost recovery for us to manage the program. We do receive the 1% or whatever that total turns out to be, then those funds would pay for our involvement with that program with no cost to the state. However, we're trying to cover from now until those funds begin to flow in. So we anticipate this will not be a reoccurring cost in the state budget.
and this is but this is tied to legislation that is moving through public safety, and the House, if I
Yes, sir,
recall
that's
correctly. And
correct.
this is this legislation is one that would form the local government 911 authority, but it's broader than that. It is not just only about local 911, but it is also about statewide communications, collaborations between the 911 authorities, looking to provide a more overarching communications network across the state amongst emergency personnel, so that first responders across the state can respond in an emergency situation, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's flooding, whether it's tornado incidences, whether it's just providing additional protection around Mercedes-Benz Stadium and our World Congress Center for events that occur here. Having that ability to communicate locally with local radio as well as across the state is a deficit that we've experienced in the state. We need to resolve that. This bill works to resolve that and set up the authority and the mechanisms to move in that direction. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, that's fair to say. And it's also, I think it's important to note that the bill as proposed would increase the funding that would be going back to the local governments for their 911 centers.
So I just wanted you to see the tie-in between, I believe it's in rules now, yes, sir. So, and many of our members of our committee are on rules and are diligent about their attendance, much to my chagrin. So if there are any questions for Director Bryson, if they're not, then I'm going to, or we do. Okay. Mr. Williams, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Thank you for coming. I didn't want you to get away without them knowing that little town where you from is near Briar Patch
Oh, yes, sir.
in McIntosh County. Since we're having a day of names,
Very familiar
we need to
with
spend a day just visiting these places in Georgia.
Is that a place that you'd like to be thrown into?
Oh, everybody wants to be thrown into Briar Patch.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. And seeing no questions, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda. But thank you again for being
Thank you,
here.
Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Next on the agenda is GBI. Director Keenan is here, along with Connie Buck. We're glad to have you both here today to present to us your request. And I know that you're fortunately we're moving on our schedule as anticipated, because I know the directors have a meeting with the governor at about 3. So we're trying to stay on, keep that and bear that in mind. So, Mr. Director, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. You entrust me with a budget of $96.8 million, but in the Keenan household, I'm not allowed to keep the checkbook. Hence, Connie Buck is always up here with me. I'll be speaking on page 14, section 30. And the first item is to annualize the funds for 4 scientists and 2 lab techs to address the sexual assault kit backlog pursuant to SB 304. And the state's plan was to fund in July 4 scientists and 2 lab techs. We have hired those scientists. And then the second part of the plan was to hire 4 scientists and 2 lab techs in January. So this is a continuation funding for those 4 and 2 lab tech positions. At the amended budget, I had talked about where we were at with the rape kit backlogs, and had mentioned that we had 206 CODIS hits out of the cases which we had worked. And Mr. Chairman, you had asked questions about what was the status of those cases where we had CODIS hits. We've embarked on a research project which we should be completed with in just a few days. We've received, we're waiting on 43 responses from local law enforcement agencies and prosecutors on the status of those cases. We have the results in for the other. So what I'd like to do is bring to you a report when it's completed of all the 206 CODIS hit cases.
And isn't it true, Mr. Director, while we're on that point, that as the rape kits are tested, that the results, where those results are quantifiable, that those results then wind up in our CODIS database so that we can keep track of them, even if it's an unknown person, then that John Doe or whoever is placed into that system so that they're there in case there's a subsequent hit that is identifiable to an individual by name.
That's correct.
Okay.
If there's not identifiable offender already, it remains out there with a question mark waiting for that offender to be identified.
And before we leave forensic science services, could you just speak to, I see you have utilization of $48,000 for existing funds for janitorial and utility expenses, but are you not experiencing a shortage in terms of staff and also overtime staff working to prep the bodies for the morgue as well as to clean up after the autopsies?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Our staffing level is not the problem in the morgue. It is that we do not have the funding to do the janitorial services and the maintenance for the morgue.
Okay.
And in the governor's budget, he had recommended that we take $48,000 out of existing funds and apply that to the janitorial maintenance services. With the fact of the matter is, we actually need $131,000 to cover maintenance and the operation of the morgue. So what we will do is hold 2 to 3 positions vacant to be able to come up with that money to operate the morgue.
What kind of positions?
There will be a combination of morgue physicians and scientist positions.
But it isn't, I mean, didn't we just go through this last year and the year before that with the expansion of the morgue in Savannah and how we had a backlog of, and there are families that are waiting for death certificates so they can this doesn't sound correct, but
Yeah.
so that they can actually collect the insurance money that they're owed, whether it be on post-mortem. A lot of folks have insurance that they've paid into, or that their parents have paid into. Now they've passed for the actual burial, as well as just insurance. Death certificates are needed in order to confirm those and to collect that money that they've been paying into for years. And so we've moved towards trying to build out the morgues, to staff the morgues, to provide salary adjustments, to recruit and retain scientists, and to perform the autopsies, and to maintain them, and also to reduce their overtime workload. And yet we now it seems like we're backtracking a little bit if we don't look at some assistance in terms of the cleanup, the janitorial requirements that you're talking about.
Yes, sir. That's a correct assessment. We have to have staff to meet the workload, but we've also got to have workspace for the staff. And the only alternative we have is we don't have enough money to cover the contract and the maintenance and the janitorial and security that goes with all that, is to fall back and hold positions vacant to come up with that money.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Next item is in regional investigative services, and this is to provide funds for 8 positions in the operating expenses for the cyber center, which will open up this July. And this will cover 1 special agent in charge, 1 digital forensic investigator, 4 investigators, and 2 special agents. And that money is for their salaries, benefits, and their operating costs. Next item is the common changes, which are affecting all agencies. And I'll go now into page 95, which is the bond projects. And the first item is $9.8 million, and this is to pay for the equipment for the new coastal crime laboratory in Pooler, Georgia. As you recall, you had previously appropriated over $36 million to build the facility, and that construction is ongoing and is be completed in May of 2019 is the objective. But this would provide all of the equipment which will be necessary to operate the laboratory there. It's comprised of 2 buildings, one of which is a crime laboratory, the other is a freestanding morgue. And so this is the money it will take to operate that. The second item under bond projects is the design of a new dual investigative drug office investigative office in McDuffie County, and that's $350,000. We have land we have a facility there which is grossly outdated, very antiquated, and the county and city are offering us the property to build a new facility which we desperately need, and this would do the design and study. Next item is facility major improvements and renovations, which is statewide to cover those major improvements in all our facilities. And after that is the facility repairs and sustainment statewide, which covers everything from painting a new building, putting in new faucets or whatever is needed for the routine maintenance of a facility. That's the GBI budget, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Williams, Representative Williams, you had your light on. Did you need to ask a question? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Director. Always good to see you. I was listening to you, Mr. Chairman, as you were questioning, certainly a very valid question, but it's amazing how the lack of janitors prevents the hiring of scientists. Sure. That does not add up, and it's unfortunate because, you know, sometimes we get a little dollar wise and penny foolish, and this seems bad because we always look at the big picture, but the folk who push the trash, without them moving around and clean up the floors, your PhDs and your doctors have no place to operate.
That's a valid point. Other questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, Director, we appreciate you being here very much. Ms. Buck, thank you for coming. Thank you for your assistance, and thank you also for your departments. Let me just take a moment of privilege here. Thank you to Nellie Miles, in particular, for coming down to Locust Grove. She lives in Henry County, but so the community is dear to her. But she, as she always does, she shows up to help cover with the press statements that have to occur with an unfortunate occurrence like this. And she was there and gave a very professional presentation on behalf of GBI, and also assisted our local sheriff and the mayor of Locust Grove. The chief of police are just besides themselves, and frankly, without her being there, a lot of information may not have been able to be released because of the emotional state that they have been in over the weekend. So many thanks to her.
Yes, sir. I'll pass that on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then we're going to move on to our next item, the CJCC. We have Judge Weaver. We also have Taylor Jones and Jay Neal are here today to present. We welcome all of you. Judge, thank you for making the trip down. It was nice to see you Friday as well. So I know you've been kind of driving up and down to the Capitol from the mountains. We appreciate you coming. I'll turn it over to Director Neal for you to present on behalf of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to come before the committee again this afternoon. I wanted to, before we get into the tracking sheet, and that's page 15 on the tracking sheet, when I came before you with the amended budget, we talked just briefly about the ad that you all put in the fiscal year 18 budget to increase our VOCA funding for domestic violence shelters, and I shared with you that we increased roughly $7 million this past fiscal year. I just wanted to highlight very briefly what we've done with VOCA funding for domestic violence shelters over the last 4 years. Fiscal year 15, our VOCA funding for domestic violence shelters was $17 million. Actually, this includes state appropriations, VOCA, VAWA, and the FISPA as well. It was $17 million in fiscal year 15, nearly $20 million in fiscal year 16, approximately $26 million in fiscal year 17, roughly $34 million in fiscal year 18. So from fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 18, we've increased funding, basically doubled from $17 million to $34 million over the last 4 years for our domestic violence shelters. I just wanted to get that in front of you. If any of you like additional information on where those funds go, including a breakdown even on the amount going to each shelter, we'll be happy to provide that to you on an individual basis, or Mr. Chairman, we'd be happy to provide it to the committee as a whole if you would like for us to do that.
Just for the committee's clarification, are these state funds?
It's a combination
versus,
of the state
yeah.
funds, the VOCA funds, the VAWA funds, VOCA being Victims of Crime Act, VAWA the Violence Against Women Act, and then also the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act. So it's a combination of all those funds.
And we have under state law, we have a very robust victims protection, and I'm not using the right terminology, but I'm going to use it as a victims' rights or a victims protection act in the state of Georgia, whereby monies are taken through add-on fees and other sources that are then preserved and essentially in trust for the victims to be sent out to help with victims' reimbursements and some medical. I think it's a. Could you just elaborate a little bit more?
The Crime Victims Emergency Fund. That's a separate fund from the funds that this comes out of. But yes.
And then these funds here, these increases have both been General Assembly ads, or they've been when we gone from 17 million to 34 million. Have those been state ads, or have those been federal ads, or a combination of both?
I can tell you the bulk of it, by far, has been the federal VOCA funds. There have been some state ads over the last couple of years, but the bulk of these increases have been through the federal VOCA funds.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll turn to our tracking sheet, page 15, and the 30.5.3 is where we get into our ads. We'll skip over the $33 we give back on state adjustments. 30.5.3 through 30.5.8 is all for our accountability court funds, and we have a requested add of $4,999,967 for increases to accountability court funds. You see, as you look at those individually, some of those are adult felony, mental health, family dependency treatment, veterans courts, DUI courts, and juvenile accountability courts. And that is the change in our fiscal year 19 budget, Mr. Chairman.
And you have provided to us, Stephen just provided a copy of, this is the map showing all the counties with the various types of accountability courts located throughout the state of Georgia, so that the committee can get a perspective on where these courts are, which jurisdictions or circuits have them, and what kinds they do have. It is.
And Mr. Chairman, we are proud to be able to say that every circuit now has an accountability court. When I sat on that side, one of the things I really fought for and pushed for was that expansion. And with this past year, we finally now have the presence of an accountability court in every judicial circuit.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, when we had the supplemental budget, we found there was a couple of circuits that were saying they had accountability courts, but yet they were applying for under a waiver. Are they included in these funds?
Included in this?
Yes. Because we didn't fund them because they have not been certified.
The thing that you didn't fund in the amended was the supplement that goes to the judges, the prosecutors, and the public defenders in circuits that have accountability courts. The funding for the court, the implementation funding for the court was present, and those courts are both operable. They both have participants. They're having court on a regular basis, and Judge Weaver may be able to speak to that a little bit more, but those courts are functioning.
It takes a period of time when a new court is organized before it can become certified. You've got to hire staff. You've got to start working with your district attorney to have participants referred to your court. So when we're talking about a waiver, it's because a lot of times the court has just started.
That's not my question. We didn't fund it because they were working under waivers. And my question is, are they still working under a waiver for these courts, or have they been certified now? Are they included in your list here?
They're not included. The expansion that they're talking about with the additional $4.9 million, or roughly $5 million, is not counting them as an expansion court. Now, they will, as an implementation court, they got going through the process with the funding committee. They were funded as an implementation court, which is a much smaller grant amount than a full court, because they're not yet seeing the participants. They don't have the cost of the drug screens. They don't have the cost of the case manager. There are a number of costs that aren't there. But there was, in the fiscal year 18 budget, a grant that was awarded to both of those courts. That money is being expended as they have brought their teams together, as they have brought the treatment providers on board, and they have brought the participants in, and they are now operating as accountability courts, seeing participants, having the cost of drug screens, having the cost of that goes on in the court. Those costs have been that has been funded through a fiscal year 18 grant that they received. When the grants open in a couple of months, and all the courts apply for additional grants, those two courts will now come in and apply as an existing court rather than an implementation court, and you can expect that their grant application will be considerably higher because they now have additional participants on board, will continue to grow, and are in that position where now they're having to look at hiring case managers and hiring some others in addition to that initial hire and initial building out that takes place through the implementation stage. I can also tell you that I know one of the courts has already submitted, and I think both have already submitted their application for certification. So they are in that process of being certified through the Council of Accountability Court judges.
You better hurry up. Through the I think it's something that's been very important to this committee, and that is understanding and having baseline data by which we can judge and determine the effectiveness of these courts. It is altruistic, and it is helpful to the system to provide for accountability courts and to provide essentially an opportunity for someone to get a little more attention that may have a treatment problem, may have other issues that are factoring into their criminal behavior. But hand-holding without some benefit, public benefit, it can be a problem for funding going forward. So from our standpoint, it's important that there be baseline data that we can look at over time to see what progress each and every accountability court, not as a whole, but each one of them is making towards achieving the goals that we set out when we created the courts. And so if you would just speak to that issue, I think that would be helpful to the committee.
Through our case management programs that we use in each of the accountability courts, we are reporting to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council all of the data concerning each and every participant in the program. That would include the number of treatment classes each month, the number of drug screens each month, the number of compliance officers each month that go out to check on the participants, the number of court reviews. And we're beginning to, and we use that in terms of when they graduate. What we're wanting to find out, I think exactly what you're wanting to know, is that in terms of graduating from drug court and those who are terminated from drug court, initially we wanted that information to see which one was more successful. The next set of data that we hope to receive is that being able to compare that to our graduates, to other participants in the criminal justice system, those who go to prison and then are released. We are working with applied research to get the data that we feel like is necessary to be able to show not only you, but the governor and the citizens of our areas, and to us as judges, that the amount of time that we're putting into these programs, that we are seeing a great success among the graduates. I was sitting there listening to the prison talk about the video. I would hope that each one of you at some point in time would attend a graduation, either of felony drug court, the mental health court, usually called HELP court, or family treatment court, because in that you will hear participants and their families talk about the fact that they are now working, they are supporting their own children, they have got a GED. Many of our graduates are in college now, paying taxes and doing all the things that we want them to do. So we know individually in our own circuits that it's working, but we feel, and certainly should be able to show whether or not the amount of money that the state of Georgia is putting into these programs compared to the amount of money that was going into the state prison system, are we in fact saving the citizens money and more importantly, actually improving the lives of the citizens that we're serving so they can be productive citizens in our state. That is the type of data that we are working on at this point in time, and we're hoping to have that. We are new, so it's going to take a period of time to get you the data that I think that you need in order to have really the information that you need, the statistics that you need to show one to the other. We've also had the Carl Vinson Institute prepare a report in terms of the economic to the state of Georgia, the economics to the state of Georgia as to how the drug courts have affected that. That report is almost ready, and we will have that to you, and I think that you will be proud of the results that they're showing at this point in time as to the economic value of each participant who has graduated from our programs and how it has affected Georgia in terms of positive economics.
What is the time frame for kind of collecting all that data and assimilating it and then drawing conclusions from it? What's the...
I'm going to let Taylor respond to that particular question.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
To expand upon what Judge Weaver has just spoken to, we've engaged in a two-step recidivism study looking at recidivism results for those that graduate and that are terminated from an accountability court. And then we're also, the second piece of that is we're doing a comparative analysis. It's similar offender populations that would otherwise qualify for an accountability court, wanting to compare what those recidivism numbers look like to our accountability court participants. We started working with Applied Research Services this past summer. It's a lengthy process. We're hopeful to have the results of that here in the coming weeks to a month. And then the Carl Vinson Institute project that Judge Weaver is speaking to, we've actually gotten the results of that study in a draft form, so we're working to finalize that here in the coming weeks as well. But I think it's also to talk about our data collection efforts in general. We're just now really turning the point of it takes up to 24 months to graduate an accountability court participant to complete. So we want to track recidivism at 12, 24, and a 36-month interval. So turning the corner on that data collection is something we're just now starting to do because it takes so long to collect that data while the person is in the program and then once they graduate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. So just to be clear, the request then in our budget, and going back to the budget, is that these are courts that have applied for and are seeking grant funds because they are expanding their existing court. They already have an established DUI court or a veterans court, and they're wanting to expand that to create a new health court or an adult, or create a new court or expand their current services that they're providing under whatever that current accountability court is that they have. Is that correct?
Yes.
There's some of that expansion, Mr. Chairman, is also maturing courts that are growing by bringing in more participants and need additional funds because they're servicing more participants. So that increase covers 2 or 3 different kinds of expansion and growth.
Okay.
It is expensive to start a court, as was asked by the question. So we felt like we were given the directive to make sure that we are increasing the number of participants in each court for certainly the bigger counties, Gwinnett, Fulton, DeKalb, those counties that make it more feasible. I mean, in other words, if those courts only have 20 people, which they have a lot more, it's too expensive. So in looking at the court, we wanted to make sure that based upon the amount of grant money we were given that particular court, and we look at this through the funding committee, that court and that judge has agreed that they will accept at least a minimum number of participants. And in some of those courts, they are not only willing to do so, they want to do so, but in order to do that, they must receive more money. For example, in my circuit, I'm serving about 120 people, and even though we're a rural circuit, the best practices says one judge should not do more than 125. So I'm pretty much where I need to be. But in other courts, they need to increase the number of participants so that we can see better economic results from serving the number of individuals. I mean, you need to serve more than 20 people. You need to serve more, and they want to serve more, but they need additional money to do so.
And just more as a comment, I think it will be helpful to see your criteria. I think we've talked about this in the past for what justifies having an expansion or a new court, because this is not a program to just expand the program for the sake of expanding the program. There's got to be meaningful results. There's also got to be some, I think, stringent criteria that help to determine when a grant is to be issued. I know you have those, but it'd be helpful to see those and review those, and let the committee also be aware of that so that they understand what the hurdles are to expansion, what the hurdles are to establishing a new court, and what data you're taking in to ensure that that it's justified, and then after the fact that there's fidelity to that program and that we are seeing the results that we anticipate seeing based upon the monies that are being invested. So that's just more of a comment. But I know, Director, under your good stewardship, those things will be addressed, and we'll look forward to receiving that information, and I thank you for the information today.
Can I just commend the Council of Accountability Court judges, Director Taylor Jones and Vice Chair Weaver and Chairman Goss, and the work that they do. They are attached to us, and we provide some support and services for them and administer the funds. But they're doing a phenomenal job in growing up the CACJ that's only been around for a couple years now, and the work that they're doing to provide the certifications and the model fidelity that they're providing, and I commend them for the work they're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Director Jones. Appreciate it. Thank you, Judge. All right. One last for today, we have the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Harris Blackwood is here. Josh Turner was here as well. Is Josh still with you, or good? Okay. We're happy to have you, and we'll go over the budget request that you have for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Our biggest portion of this is funds that come from a 1.5% currently surcharge on traffic fines. That generates this year about $2.9 million. And the estimate for next year is that it would be about the same. That number has kind of gone down because we're not writing quite as many tickets as we once were. And that's I think that's a sign that people are perhaps taking a little more caution. But there is a bill pending, and it is in was in the Public Safety Committee today. It's not our agency bill, but comes from the industry, that would almost double that amount of money and would allow us to extend that scholarship to more students. This year we will touch about 5,200 students with our scholarships, and when that money comes in, it runs in arrears. It takes time. The cases have to be prosecuted. We would see, about somewhere in the neighborhood between $5.8 and $6 million. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to educate young people with these funds. The remainder of our funds are our match on federal funds for our planning and administration portion of our office, and we have to have an actual cash match for that. So that's 50% of our operating cost for salaries and benefits and so forth.
Mr. Blackwood, if you wouldn't just mind talking to a little bit about, you've got a presentation,
yes,
and I appreciate the budget request, but I did want the committee to be aware. Mr. Blackwood, his office have been working diligently on trying to educate the youth on what distracted driving means, how it's impacting them, how it endangers their lives. So we are going to actually we're going to see the video, a little glimpse of it, about 10 minutes of it. Is that right? And so we have some goggles that we're going to, or sunglasses, or 3D.
And we're currently using our federal funds to send this to high schools all around the state, and we would like to use a portion of it would be up to the commission, but we would like to perhaps use a portion of this to expand that as we can.
So this is like a virtual reality of
it is. It's a 3D film that sort of takes you into a real crash situation, makes you a little more aware, and I think it has some real promise, and it has enough, I'm going to use the term cool, that kids are willing to watch it. We're able to show it multiple times on a given day at a given high school where students of all ages can see it, and we think it's very, very well done. And with that, I'll defer to our folks who are putting that on.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it, Ms. Blackwood. Thank you for your time, and we'll look at this program you've got here.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if you would be so kind to excuse me after this, I've got a meeting across the way.
So I've heard. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Come up front a little bit. So, yeah, if you can give them. So last year, like Director Harris said, we did 100 schools. I'm Kenneth Bain. I'm the project director that puts on the program. And last year we did 100 schools with the Governor Highway Safety Office, and this is some of the results just to kind of give you an idea. So students' perception that it's not dangerous to drive without a license. So as you can see, there's pre and post. So we went from 34% down to 18%. So we ask questions at the beginning of the program, and then we ask questions at the end, so we can have some type of way of tracking the results. Next question. Student perception that it's not dangerous to text and drive. Again, went from 17% down to 11%. Next question. Your friend is driving too fast. Will you ask him or her to slow down? We've all know nowadays it's not just the person driving. A lot of times the person in the passenger seat can be a distraction or a help. So as you can see, you know, it went from 60-some% up to 75, saying that they will insist, and the other ones went down. And there's a few other questions just like that, you know, different questions just reiterating that the program effectiveness. So prior to the program, we ask them the question before they see anything. And then after the program, we ask the same question. So it showed that we're changing their intentions. The modality of this program is based on best practice. You know, that multi-sensory experience is an evidence-based proven concept. And so what we're doing is we're giving them the perception of this is what it feels like, but now you're in a virtual world, because you can make the wrong decisions and see what your behavior is going to end up like, and understands like, okay, now when I do this in real life, I should not do this. And it actually sticks in their mind. So we're not lecturing to them, we're not preaching to them, and we definitely don't show any gory pictures, because none of that, you know, it's been proven none of that works. You know, so we're just basically presenting the information to them and letting them take it in as adults, and that's the way they like it.
It is. Well, we appreciate this, and this is done in a couple pilot programs in a couple of schools. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is the first year we did it with the Governor Highway Safety Office. We did about 15 schools.
Mm-hmm.
That was in, I think, 15, 16, 17. Actually, we did 100 schools, and this year we're currently the process of doing 100 schools. Georgia has about almost between 500-600 high schools, so you know we're still like a drop in the bucket, and that's what Director Harris is wanting to do, is expand to get access to more schools, because this is just taking care of the educational side. The engineering side is being handled, and then you have enforcement, which is the police officers. So now, you know, we need to deal with the education to kind of create that perfect synergy to create change.
Good. Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Okay. Good. We appreciate the presentation and the information today. It's very helpful.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for today. We have a meeting. Let me clarify for the committee. We will not meet in the morning. The Rules Committee will trumps, and so they will meet at 9 a.m. and then we will reschedule our meeting that was supposed to be at 9 a.m. And I said on the floor that it would be 4 o'clock tomorrow, but it will actually be 4 o'clock on Wednesday, and we'll get an update on that because we may go long tomorrow afternoon. So Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, that should give time for people to move through their committees and get those done by the time we're ready to meet. And then I think we're going to meet in room 406 at 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. So with that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.